So here I'm going to explain box 1.4, and this focuses on Rappaport's rule. So this was the idea that as we move towards the tropics, that a greater number of species could be supported if they had much narrower latitudinal ranges. In other words, more species could be accommodated. So this is an interesting idea to look at. So what we see here are the number of species as we move from the equator to the pole. And what we can see is at the equator, actually, total number of species, in this case of gastropod mollusks, is somewhat lower than at slightly higher latitudinal levels. Then as we go into colder waters, so we get to 40 degrees north, progressing towards the poles, we see that the number of gastropod species supported starts to fall away. So basically, in warmer climates, we have more species. So is that actually supported by the idea that these taxa have a narrower range, latitudinal range? So Roy et al. Examined this by doing a survey of gastropods on the Atlantic and the Pacific coast. So the Pacific shown in the blue line, the Atlantic shown in the red. And actually what they found was this was not the case at all. So if we look at the latitudinal range of species found at the equator, we see actually that their latitudinal range over which they can exist is much, much higher than at all other latitudes, if you like. So this somewhat overturned Rappaport's rule, and it certainly, the evidence did not support the idea proposed by Rappaport. So this is really interesting insofar as it shows the beauty of having a theory to actually go out and test as a biologist. The other point to note in this figure is the fact that the patterns that we see for the Pacific and the Atlantic are actually quite different, with the species in the Atlantic actually having a much broader latitudinal range than those that we find in the Pacific. So that in itself is also interesting.